Hey everybody, Larry Lawton here, and I want to talk about policing. Before I get started, please check out my membership programs. Check out my book, and you're going to see why I'm so passionate about this situation from being abused in prison. I was strapped down naked, beaten, and tortured by guards. And that's not even a joke, and it makes me get goosebumps when I think about it. But I have to tell you that because this is where I'm coming from. I also want to say that as an honorary police officer from the city of Lake St. Louis, Missouri, I know what good policing is about. And I know how important good policing is. And I know more importantly how important good leadership in policing is. I want to say that if you haven't joined our Larry Lawton Action Crew, please do. Because we're going to be starting on a couple of very hot topics with prison and law enforcement here very, very shortly. So please join. It's all in the description below. We're going to get really hot on this because these are topics that are passionate. I'm very passionate about, and it's the change that we need. So I'm going to define what's going on in policing, what needs to change, and what the protesters can consider a win to stop protests. Because you can't protest forever. You protest for a reason. You protest to get change. And let me emphasize this right away. I am 1,000% in support of the protests. 1,000%. I'm not in the support of rioting and looting. I understand it. I actually understand civil unrest. But I do want to say that's not the way to get the changes we want. And let me explain what I mean by that. I did a video here on YouTube with the chief of police of the town I live in, Palm Bay, Florida. And I got to know the chief of police. We talked at length off camera, besides the on-camera interview you could see right here. But you know what? The chief changed his mind. That's an open-minded chief of police. I changed his mind. I was one of the people who helped change his mind on body cameras. I think it's so important that every police department in this country have body cameras. Because it's sad to think if we did not have a body camera or the person didn't have the camera of that police officer killing George Floyd, where would we be? We wouldn't have the changes that I think are coming. And I'm going to also explain what I believe in the defunding and the things you have to consider a win when you're instituting a protest. Okay, the first reason you protest in anything is because you want change. You want your voice to be heard. Obviously, one voice wasn't enough. Multiple voices weren't enough. And sadly, multiple incidents of police wrongs are not or were not getting heard until the George Floyd incident. Now, let me emphasize this by saying I'm a supporter of law enforcement. I'm a supporter of good law enforcement. Positive law enforcement, things that help the community, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit here. But when I keep watching what's going on and I see civil unrest or I see protesting in certain cities, and I'm wondering at what end, where does it end? You can't protest forever. You just can't have protests forever to disrupt everybody because you end up hurting the people you're trying to help. That's number one. Number two, you have to have what we call, and I even call with the Larry Lawton Action Crew, we have to have a win. What's a win? What do we define as a win with protests? What do we define as a win in law enforcement? You know, as a man who went through a lot in prison, and I went the rough route. When I was getting abused and when the prison system was killing friends of mine, I went the hard route. I thought the physical route as a physical guy was the answer. I thought, okay, I'm going to fight the system. And I did everything in the world when I was in the hole. I got maced. I got concussion grenaded. I got shocked. I was beaten. And you can't beat them. You can't physically beat them. It's like the police. Can you outshoot them? No. Do you want to outshoot them? No. They have tanks. And that's wrong, but I'm going to get into that here in a little bit. But so you have to define what your win is. In prison, I found out that my win was when I started writing senators, congressmen, public officials, whether it's the director of the Bureau of Prisons, whether it's the Attorney General, whether it was the President of the United States. I wrote numerous people and had other people writing numerous people to get my voice heard, because nobody wants to believe or even wants to hear an ex-con, which is sad. Yes, I made my mistakes. Yes, I belonged in prison. I was a bad guy. I'm never proud of my past that way. I am proud of what I do today, which is I try to help young people make good choices. I try to help young people realize that the choices they make today will affect the rest of their lives. And I don't want them to ruin their lives. I don't want the choices they make today to ruin their life, because sadly, we're a very penal country in the United States, which is wrong, and we're going to try to change that. But at this point, we have to make sure we make the good choices and we proceed in the right way to make the changes necessary. Now, I think everybody, because in these protests, we're seeing whites, brown, black, all kinds of people are protesting against police brutality. And I'm not going to say it's in a general, and people ask me all the time, what is it? Well, the first thing law enforcement has wrong, the problem with law enforcement, and these are the changes that need to be made. So people are protesting for change. But I ask a lot of people on the street right now, the protests are what are you protesting? And they'll say they're protesting police brutality. I get it. So what do you want stopped? And they'll say, well, I don't want police brutality. I get that too. How do you do it, and what do you consider a win? What do you consider sufficient enough problems or answers by the police side or the government side that you could say, well, okay, we're going to try this, we're going to do this, and then we're going to go on our way. The reason protests have started is because people had unrest, and changes were supposed to be made, but they weren't made. And that's why here in 2020, we have such unrest in the communities because of law enforcement, because of the way law enforcement is either trained, the hiring practices, or what people perceive to be the right and wrong of law enforcement. Well, I am just like you, everybody. I am upset with what's gone on and what is going on with law enforcement. And here's what I consider a way to stop protests. I'm not going to say stop them. To have people stop the protesting and get the changes we need instituted to have positive changes. The first thing you got to do is define what a win is. What do we want out of the protests? I know we want to stop police brutality. I know we want to stop racism in the police departments. I know we want to stop cops profiling people, because let's face it, they do. It's part of their training. And they could say it's not, but don't tell me they're not told by another partner or somebody, hey, look out for that guy. I understand that profile. That's trying to look for a crime before it happened. And I get that. I understand. If you've seen a guy with a mask and a bag of jewelry over his head and he's running down the street, that's not profiling. You picking out somebody that is probably robbing jewelry. I think that's a justifiable stop. But stopping a person for the color of their skin or the way their accent is wrong, and it has to stop. And here's how you implement change. The first thing you have to do is say what you want. In my opinion, we need three things, major things in law enforcement to change. We need a use of force policy in all law enforcement, whether it's general or your community. If it's not in your community, please email us, because we will help you get your voice out there with the Larry Lawton Action Crew, because it's important that we get little police departments to change, i.e. what I did with my local police department. They don't have body cams. The police chief came out in the newspaper and said he's going to get body cams. So I think that's a very positive change. Well, in law enforcement, we need certain changes that are going to be mandatory, and if they're broken, there has to have a consequence for the things that happen there when they break a policy. It can't be just, oh, we're going to look into it. That's what people are sick and tired of. Oh, I was talking to a person the other day, and they said to me, oh, well, they did the right thing with the George Floyd. They fired the guy. Let me tell you something. If I did that to somebody, and I had 3 friends of mine with me, and they were watching me put my knee on a person's neck for 8 minutes and 45 seconds and kill that man, I would have been arrested that day, that night. The minute that video came out, I would have been arrested. Period. And all the other people would have been arrested, and then they would figure out what is right or wrong. That's what should happen to a law enforcement officer as well. I'm not trying to put them in any different higher or lower standards, but they have to at least be at the standard I am at. I talked to enough law enforcement chiefs of police and sheriffs, and every one of them are outraged. And even when I said, hey, wait a minute, what about the guy that's on the job for 4 days and he was just following that sergeant or whatever he was, that guy Chalvin, the one who's been charged with the murder now? What about the guy who's on the job for 4 days? That's a really tough situation for me. Although chiefs of police say no, they have to know right from wrong and they have to stop it. But you know, with the culture of law enforcement, if that guy tried to stop that incident and nobody filmed it and that wouldn't have came out, that guy's career was probably over. And that's the problem with law enforcement. They're not policing themselves. But we're going to get into that. So there has to be some things that we stop rioting for or stop what's going on right now. Here is one of them. We need body cameras on every law enforcement officer in this country. Every single one. We shouldn't have to depend on a community member or a citizen taking a video of an incident and then having that have to go public before we do something. Every cop should have a camera on, and if they turn it off, they are fired. You hear what I said? And I'm not talking about turning it off to go take a pee. I am turning it off. You hear many, many stories of, oh, the camera was turned off and he didn't record what happened. Right away, that there has to be a solo investigation for that alone. And that man has to be either disciplined in some way or another, right up to being fired, or criminal charges for tampering with evidence of a crime. That's what it could be. The second thing we need to do, they have to have a community or citizens review board. Here's the big problem. Right now, citizens don't trust the police in general. And I'm not talking about very pro-police or very anti-police. I'm talking middle-of-the-road people. I'm talking about good citizens who see enough on TV and read enough in the newspapers and actually hear stories enough that they're saying, wait, I don't trust them. I'm talking people like my mother. My mother's 87 years old. And I'm going to ask the chief of police from this department to come to my home and talk to my mother. And I hope he does. Because my mother will sit and tell me every time I go, tell her I'm going to see a chief of police, be careful, Larry. Don't trust him. Think about that. This is an 87-year-old lady who never, ever did a thing, never cursed. I've never heard my mother curse once in my life. Not once in my life did I hear my mother curse. But we need, in law enforcement, a citizens review board. How does that work? Anytime a cop is accused of something done to a citizen, there has to be a board that sees that besides just the police. They should sit around a table and they should take a diverse people from the community. And it could be a person like myself who made mistakes but reformed themselves. It could be a pastor of the church. It could be a construction worker. It could be a public works person. It could be a business owner. It has to be a diverse group of citizens that review this, along with the police. Let the police explain the video to everybody and see what a layman thinks. Because you're going to look at that and say, wait, if I did that, what would happen? But we need that independent trust to come back. Right now, I'm in a county in Florida called Brevard County, where the police sheriff of the county, he investigates his own murders. That should be illegal. That has to be stopped, and it should be illegal for a sheriff or a police chief to investigate their own men. They can investigate them for firing reasons, like a company owner would investigate something that their employee did. But that police chief can't be the all-tell-all. Has to come to some kind of board where he shows what he did. So, they say, well, we have internal affairs. The community doesn't trust the police. That's sad. But we need to build that trust back up. How do you build that trust back up? If you have a citizens review board and that citizen review board sees all the evidence, all the video, and then can explain to the community they live in what happened, that would be a very big step towards transparency. Because without transparency, you're not going to get anywhere. So right away, the protesters have to have demands. What are the demands? The demands should be body cameras. The demand should be hiring practices. The demand should be citizens review board. The demand should be a use of force policy that if it's violated, somebody gets held accountable. Listen, there is no policy in the world that says you gotta choke a man till he's out. Now, if your life is on the line and you, like if I was fighting a man and I had to knock him out or do something to subdue him, I gotta do what I gotta do to survive. I get that. Nobody is saying anything against that. You know, it really troubles me that I see a gun. The first thing a cop does is pull out his gun. Because if a cop pulls out his gun, guess what happens? You got two avenues to go. The guy complies or you shoot him. I don't get it. Why are you pulling your gun out immediately? Are there other ways to handle a situation that you do not have to pull out a firearm? Obviously there are. If you're dealing with a known person who has a firearm and he's ready to shoot, or he pulls a gun or something of that nature, absolutely. I don't want a cop to get killed unnecessarily. I feel very bad for cops when they're put in a situation when they don't know what to do. But that comes back to training. You know, I'll even go before training. Training is so important. Why is the military so good? Because they do nothing but train, and train. Cops don't do that. They do the police academy, and after the police academy, what real training do they have? And I mean conflict resolution training. How to talk your way out of a problem. How to deal with an unruly person. How to deal with a mental patient. What do you do with that mental patient? And it's a tough job. First of all, as cops will like this, I think they need to be paid more. I really do. I think no cop should have to worry about their bills. I think they should go into that job with a clear head. But they need to be hiring the right people. That stops everything. You cannot, and I know I hear cops say, I can't hire people. I don't have enough people. I don't have enough cops. I'd rather have less cops, but good cops, than hire a bad cop that's going to kill someone and make my department a bad department. You know, when I talk to police chiefs, and I do all the time, we discuss policing in general. And I'm going to come up with a whole entire philosophy on non-stopping people. But before that, I'm here just to talk about how do we define a win for communities right now that people are protesting in. You know, anybody who's scared to say Black Lives Matter, something's wrong. They do matter. And people say, well, don't white lives matter? All lives matter. We know that. That's the baseline. But the reason Black Lives Matter right now, and there is an organization about it, because I have a great black friend of mine who lives in Iowa. And I'm not going to mention his name, but he's one of the great guys. I talk to him on the phone. He's political. He understands things. And he's an older gentleman, works hard, worked 2 jobs his whole life. You know what he said to me, Larry? He goes, you wouldn't want to live a week in my skin. He goes, I've been at a gas station and I have guns put in my face by cops because I'm a colored guy, because I'm black. Because that fits the description. If it's anything to do with a black guy, what do? They point a gun at him. Is that how they do it with a white guy? I don't think they do that. I don't think they say, hey, if it's a white guy, all of a sudden a black guy, and that, now that's implicit bias, and we can get into a whole bunch of, which we will. But for this video, I am talking about how do we define a win for protesters? How do we, as a community, define what law enforcement needs to do? You know, you hear things like defund the police. Obviously, we need the police. Let's get that straight. Police are needed. But you know what they're not needed? I look at the police department in my neighborhood, and they have a command center. I don't know what it costs, $1 million, $600,000, $800,000, $1 million for a command center bus. How often do you think they use that? How often? Ask your community leader, how often do they use the tanks or the armored vehicles or the equipment that they spend mega money on, where they could have spent that money a lot better? Now, obviously, this is a philosophy now of community policing that is all about community. I look at things and I know this is going to date me, Andy Griffin show, and Andy. Do you think Andy would have a command center, or Andy never even had a gun on him. Didn't even walk around with a gun. Sheriff Andy Taylor. And I look at that and I say, boy, wouldn't that be a great community where there are people, hey Andy, how you doing? What's going on? Oh, I saw a suspicious guy. Oh, we'll look into it. And it's the drunk or it's somebody in town. And he treated everyone with respect. And I look at that and I know that's a TV show, but believe it or not, that's the way we should have law enforcement. They got to be part of the community. When you see cops with so much gear on them that they're looking for a war, that's very intimidating to the community. When I see cops today, I saw a cop with a gun here, the vest, the camouflage, the pants, the boots. Do we really need that to be our cops? Do we? I don't think we do. How cops spend the money. In the community I live in, I'm very active in my community, and I went and I questioned how the police department was spending money. And you know what the police chief told me? We had a very great, good discussion. I got a lot of respect for the chief of police, Chief Moya. And he said to me, Larry, he goes, don't think our conversations and what you did hasn't made me think about how I spend my money. And that made me feel good because I believe him. And I'm going to still watch that. I think it's very important that police spend money the right way. Because first of all, it's not their money. It's our money. It's the community's money. It's the police department's money that we give them. The community gives the police the money. So with that being said, we need to know how that money is being spent. Do I want my police department spending $1 million on some tank or something in this? And you know what they say? Well, that didn't come out of the citizen. We got that out of confiscation funds, or we got that out of a grant from the government. Well, the government should give the same amount of money that tank was worth to a basketball court in the inner city, to a youth center. We've gotten away from youth centers. We've gotten away from things to do for young people. You go to a lot of communities, and there's really not much a kid can do today. And they tell them, stay out of trouble. I don't see kids playing stickball in the streets. I don't see kids going to the basketball courts. I don't see kids having organized leagues. How about the police department put together a league with the police department as players and the community as players, and get a person like myself, somebody who deals with a lot of the youth in the community, to go in there and bring the youth to the games and get dialogues going and get interactions going in a positive way. I used to run a golf tournament, and I'm bringing it back, where I brought inner city kids and people of no means to golf. Never knew what even a golf ball was, no less a golf club. And I'd bring them to a golf tournament. And you know who I had teaching them? A police officer, a judge, a prosecutor. Because sadly, most times a police officer sees a kid who's an inner city kid is when they're either arresting them or in that community on a call that is not positive. There's not positive. Now, let me emphasize that there are a lot of positives the police do. At least they do in this community. There are police officers I see helping homeless people, helping kids, and that's what makes me feel like there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But getting back to just the protesters need to define a win. And the win has to be written in stone. And when I say written in stone, with consequences to come. If a police officer does something that is so egregious that he needs to be charged, there shouldn't be an immunity. If a police officer is bad, And here's people debate this all the time. We can't sue the cops. When you sue the cops, guess who you're really suing? You're suing me, the taxpayer. You're suing the guy who pays taxes. That's who you're suing, because they're the funders of the police. We need more accountability with police in whatever way is the best for that community. A big city community who could obviously have more training and more money and stuff of that nature. But all communities need accountability with police. So we need a code of ethics with the police that the community makes up, not just the police department. They might have their own, but we need ours. We need a community. They need to sign a community thing. And what should be on the top of that community sign paper that they sign? The number one priority of a cop? That protect and serve is bullshit. I protect and serve the community. Larry Lawton protects and serves the community. Because if I see a guy out there robbing something, I'm going to stop him. So I am protecting the community. And I'm serving the community. What their first and foremost number one thing on any police citizens document that we need to get done is, the number one job of a police officer should be? He should help the community. Period. Help the community. That's their job. If you don't base everything off a cop helping the community, we're dead in the water. We're dead. It irks me, and it really does. It really agitates me to see a cop drive by a car that's pulled over on the side of the road for whatever reason. They shouldn't be stopping to pull that guy over. They should stop so nobody else hits him. They should stop and see if he needs help with a flat. Does he need help on waiting for the tow truck to come? Is it a lady who can't change a flat? You help him change a flat. Cops need to be more helping the community, not my job. Get the guy, hold on. Get out of that car, help that person, talk nice to that person, and make sure that person is well taken care of, because you're there to help them. If you don't help the community, you shouldn't be a cop. Period. That should be your number one thing. And you know who you got to get rid of for that? You got to get rid of the asshole chiefs of police or the asshole sheriffs who don't believe in that. And they're going to come up with 1,000 ways why. No, they got to be ready for the criminal. That's bullshit. It's straight bullshit. Our leaders in law enforcement are the ones that should be held accountable for the actions of the people under them. So if you're a positive-minded community police chief, you're going to have positive, community-minded police officers. If you don't, fire them. Get rid of them. They don't belong being a police officer. End of story. They just don't. I'd rather have less cops but better cops than have some bad apples in a department. Cops need to weed out the bad people, and they know who they are. But that big blue wall of silence has got to be broken down. Because I just got an email from a man, and he was telling me how he was fired for exposing a cop that was embezzling money. And that's sad because, one, I believe it. Two, the way it was written, and I looked into the case already, and there was a whole bunch of news articles on it. So I don't just take an email and just say, I believe that. I look into these emails. And I look into the cases they talk about. And sadly, I'm getting too many emails. We have a sheriff's department where I live that it is so adversarial against the young community. He thinks everybody who smokes pot should go to jail. Are you kidding me? In 2020, anybody who smokes pot belongs in jail? I mean, does everybody who drinks belong in jail? Because that man has no clue what's going on. And all he's doing is he's penalizing everybody for his beliefs. And, this is a sheriff department that is out of control, that all they want is power. They want more and more departments. They're even code enforcement officers. I don't get that. They're animal control officers. Are you kidding me? They run the shelters? Sheriff's department? Well, that's a whole nother video I'm going to do. But at this point, we need police that want to help the community. If they don't have that on the top of their list, they don't belong being a police officer. That's number one. Number two, they have to have a use of force policy. Number three, they have to have body cams. Have to have body cams. Those are three things that have to happen. They have to happen. They need a citizens review board. Has to happen. You know, a police chief told me, maybe not in the small communities. I thought long and hard about that, and I disagree with him. It doesn't take much to put together a citizens review board, and when a cop does something stupid, you're put in a room, whether it's once a week, and I don't care if you have coffee and just talk about law enforcement, and then, hey, this came up. Let's look at this. What do you think? Put it up on a board, show everybody what happened, explain it. If you have to have somebody come in there, this is anything official where someone's going to jail. This is a citizens review board, which gives the police department transparency. It needs transparency with people of influence in a community, or even regular citizens. Put my mother on the board. Put the guy down the road who's a construction worker who likes his community, helps out. How about putting the Little League coach on the board? And this is a citizens review board. They have them in a lot of big cities. They need them in all cities. All cities need them. If you got a police department, you need a citizens review board. And lastly, they got to spend money the right way. Our money, but it's got to be spent the right way. I implore you as a citizen out there right now, I want you to go look at your police department's budget. I want you to look at their expenditures, and I want you to look at what they use for confiscation funds. You know, the federal law states they have to spend, I think it's 25% of money on community policing. Now, are they playing games with that money and defining community policing as something that's not community policing? Are they using that money for training, which is not a community policing thing? Are they not spending that money on the youth? I don't care if it's buying basketballs or courts or having toys. They do spend some of the money on, Christmas stuff, which I believe in, giving it to inner cities, but you're only getting a few people. Bring more community-minded stuff involved. I wouldn't care if you spend it on a basketball league that the police are involved in. Get them healthy. Get them playing with the community, because once you start interacting in a sports way, you have a camaraderie with parts of a community. And guess what? You're not going to run people's records because they play basketball, because all you're going to do is alienate people. You want people to come to there with an open mind and look at you as a police officer and say, that guy's a good guy. Good shot too, man. He really knows how to shoot. Good dude, but a good dude. Because you're sitting down sweating on a bench with him and you're talking about the basketball game, or you're talking about the Orlando Magic or the LA Lakers. That's policing. That's policing in its best way. Do I want to defund detectives that solve murders? Of course not. Do I want to defund any kind of team that's needed? The things that are not needed in police departments is tanks. Now, does one department, let's call it my county, I try to base everything off this county. This county's got 550,000 people. They have a sheriff's department, which is the biggest law enforcement agency here. Do they need some higher end gear for something that can happen? Absolutely. But does every little police department in this area need a command center? Why? You can't borrow the one off the sheriff? How many times a year is that command center used? I really want to look that one up. That's my next project, to delve deep into how police departments use the equipment they get. And what's the ROI? You know what that is? Return on ROI, return on investment. How much money did you spend on that, and what good did that do to make sure your money is spent right? Our money is spent right. So I want that to be done. So if we got the 5 things that law enforcement need to do to start, I'm going to go on and on. I can go on and on with this. I know it's long, but I want you to listen to me. I want young people to listen to me. I need you young people to be more active. I need you to start thinking. Listen, if you're making bad choices, I'm not judging you. And I hope the police in your area don't judge you. I hope they want to help you. But make good choices so you don't run into them in the wrong way, like I did. But I have a lot of respect for good law enforcement. A lot of respect. But I have zero respect for that asshole that thinks he's a macho guy and he wants to come up to me with his badge and his chest out. And I got a badge and a gun and I'm who I am. I'm a tough guy. You know, I'd like to stick you in a prison cell with a bunch of guys that I know and see how long you last. That bravado won't last. It won't last. Someone will knife you and shank you real quick. And then what are you going to do? You know, a lot of people ask me, what's those things? Well, how can we do it? How can we help law enforcement while we help in the community? And why are people protesting? I believe in the protest. They need to be here, and here's what we need to do. So remember what I said, and I want you to think about it. We need citizen review boards. We need body cameras. We need spending the money, our money, the right way. We can get those things right off the bat. They need a use of force policy that is real and it has teeth. Meaning if they violate that, they're gone. All states need to institute a policy that if a police officer is fired, every police department has to know why, and they can't get a job in another one. Their law enforcement credentials need to be pulled. That's how you get rid of bad cops. Because right now, a bad cop just goes to another state or another agency and joins that agency. He finds a chief that's a hard-ass asshole, and he gets hired onto that department, and you have problems. The guy Chauvin should have never been on the police department, not with 18 violations. Should not have been on that police department. If I was a police department chief, I would start looking at all the records of all my guys and see what's true and not. And I think a citizens review board could help them. Because I don't want to penalize people who do good jobs. And I understand bogus complaints. I really do. But you know what? You got to read between the lines because not all of them are bogus. And they need to be held accountable. Whether it's individually, which I think is important. I think if you could sue a cop that does something so egregious that he can be held accountable financially, he's going to think twice about what he does. Because that pension that he wants and get out at 20 after he abuses people, that'll end real quick. And that's part of what we need to do. So listen, I know I'm rambling. I love what I do with my YouTube channel. I love and respect you guys out there. Coming up, I have a whole nother video on items they can use, things that police officers can use, because I do it now. I have things that help police departments. Obviously, they get hard-headed, and that's here and there. I'll tell them if they don't want to use what I use, that's great, but use something. Use something that connects you with the community. Because right now, you're not connected with the community. You think you are, and you're not. Because I deal with the people who keep emailing me saying, this police chief or this one, and I hear it from all over the country. And I am not scared to go to the police chief like I did in my own town. And I'm going to actually talk to him about a couple of these things. And then maybe do a video with him and see what his views are. Because I like getting 2 points of view. At least 2 points of view. And I think the more dialogue we have, the better we'll all be as police officers, as communities. So let's all stay safe out there. If you're a cop, please stay safe out there yourself. If you're a citizen, go back and look at what I posted about what to do if you get stopped by the police. Because that's a whole nother video coming next. And that video is going to be about what the cops shouldn't be stopping you for. And that you're going to be surprised at what I say about that. But please, citizens, be safe. You know, it's sad that I have to say that, but be safe against everybody. Everybody. And cops, please be safe. I understand the danger of your job. I really do. And I respect and really give you a lot of support if you're a good cop. If you care about people and you want to help the community, you got me on your side. If you're the asshole out there, just turn this off and say, fuck that guy, because I know that's what you're going to do anyway, and you make me laugh. But please, everybody, stay safe. Make good choices. That goes for any age. Obviously, I think about that today, every day. And you know what? I want you to comment. I want you to subscribe to us. And I also want to get your emails. So we have new emails coming up on the board. And we have help emails, fan emails, business emails. So check out our About page, and you'll see stuff there to contact us in any way you can. Stay safe, everybody. Much respect and love to you guys. And thanks for listening to me. Have a great day. Stay safe.